Perfect. So welcome to Social Engineering Your Metrics using data science to provide value in your reporting. I'm Joe, as eloquently introduced by Summer. Getting the show on the road. About me, everything's already been covered. The only thing new is there is a link to pre-order the book. That is nothing but a redirect domain. It will take you directly to Amazon. If you're not comfortable clicking links from a social engineer, which you should certainly be skeptical of, you can just search for the phrase practical social engineering on Amazon and get the find it that way. I'm going to turn my camera on just for a second, just so that I can say hi and do the in-person thing as much as possible. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and kill the camera. There's the competitive side of me that's already been covered. So the thoughts and opinions in this presentation do not reflect those of my employers, past, present, or future. Getting into the actual presentation. The objectives of this presentation is I want to talk about general metrics, and then I want to talk about social engineering specific metrics, some of the problems with metrics, and the introduction and application of new metrics. We'll talk a little bit about analysis models, and then as with any research, I will talk about the potential for future research and future integration. Excuse me for one moment. My apologies for that. So to continue, current InfoSec metrics that we run into, we see password metrics, breach metrics, response metrics, dwell time, and return on investment. So password metrics, that could be the number of passwords dropped within a breach. That could be things such as the length of passwords, the complexity of passwords. It could also include the frequency analysis of how often certain passwords exist in things, or for this breach, 25% of the passwords were included in john.txt or rocku.txt. Then we can look at metrics about breaches. That's going to be the things that Verizon and Symantec put out in the DBIR and the ISTR. The Anti-Phishing Working Group puts out a report very similar as well. There are metrics associated with response, and the DBIR attempts to capture that as well. But then we also hear, especially from vendors, about dwell time and how long basically between the time of compromise until the time something actually happens. That would be your dwell time. And then, of course, looking at the business side, you've got the return on investment. So that's kind of like where we are right now with metrics. And specific to social engineering, based on my time doing social engineering engagements as a consultant, this was kind of what we were looking at. How many people opened, and typically we didn't look at it as a ratio, it was just a percentage or a straight number. This many people opened the email, this many people clicked on the link or performed the action. Here are how many credentials that the consultant was able to steal, and by steal mean convince the victims to willingly give to me. And then there may be averages or a ratio of each of those three metrics. And while, I mean, we're measuring something, but I mean, with that, there comes a problem. And what is the problem with metrics in that manner? And in that manner, the problem is they don't really measure a whole lot. And the reason I say that is emails are meant to be opened. People don't send emails for the purpose of just sending emails. Okay, yeah, sure they do. But realistically, if someone is sending an email, it has the intention of being opened by someone. So punishing people for opening email is not a good idea, because a good fish, a really well-constructed fish, and I'm not talking like the garbage fish that we get that are automatically generated by exploit kits. I'm talking like when you have someone who's legitimately trying to gain access to your organization, who's done the research, it's not going to set off any alarms. And if there's a preview pane, if there's anything malicious, it may execute in the preview pane anyway. Honestly, a lot of training platforms fall short on talking about detonating links. And that's basically, and that is predicated on the assumption that an organization has a training program that is actually engaging and maintained and nurtured, not just something of, hey, you know, our auditor said that we have to have training, so we bought this training. Go ahead and click through it. It says it's supposed to take 2 hours, but if you click through it fast enough, you can get done in 25 minutes. So we don't really talk about a whole lot of that. And a lot of the training still says if it's HTTPS with the green padlock, it's safe. And then the other side of that is that humans by nature are going to be curious. They are going to click things they're not supposed to, and they are going to input things that they shouldn't. And in all honesty, when we talk about non-tech folks, or, you know, in industry, we sometimes refer to them as the normals. For the most part, a lot of them use the exact same password everywhere. And if they don't use the exact same password, it's a slight variant. So it might be Nick 1999 on Facebook. The Twitter might be capital Nick 1999. The Instagram might be Nick 1999 exclamation point. Anyone who's done any exploitation or playing with passwords or even any scripting can probably attest to how easy it would be to generate a word list that just contains one additional character on that, or does variations thereof. So in that sense, it's not secure. If you want evidence of this, right now Scylla is not available, but when Scylla is available, that's a really good resource to look at. Dehashed is another one that you can see that. And then the fact that we, for some email addresses, you can drop it into Have I Been Pwned and find 8, 10, 12 breaches that they've been associated with. And that's not always indicative of the same, it's not indicative always that the user is the one that made the mistake, because by nature of the beast, a user could take every step to do everything right, and then something like Target's data breach happened. The HVAC vendor allows unfiltered access into the organization, and it just goes south. It just happens. So what am I getting at? Well, we've talked about caring about the opens. The problem with this is if we focus too much on caring about how many people open an email, that's going to encourage management to punish people for opening emails, which is a bad thing. With that, and this is a slippery slope, it can encourage naive and problematic employees to use this as a means to avoid work. So, hey, I sent you an email to get this done by 3 o'clock on Tuesday. Why didn't you do it? Well, the email looks suspicious, so I didn't open it. And if that's what your training program's message is, I mean, you could do actions against the employee, but it's probably not going to look good for you. And at the same time, it doesn't accurately assess risk in its totality. So caring about clicks, while clicks are more relevant than open, they test the human. But here's the reality: when we're doing these engagements, too often, whenever I was in scoping calls, I would hear the manager that's authorizing the test scheming against, oh, I'm going to show these employees, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, yes, there is a degree of testing the human element in these types of engagements. But at the same time, we also need to view this from the perspective of, we also need to be testing the technology as well. Because if we properly implement defense in depth, the human can make the mistake, but there will be some sort of mitigating control that's going to keep whatever the payload is, whether that be malware, stealing creds, whatever, from going all Hulkamania and running wild on your enterprise, brother. And sorry for the reference there, but ultimately, if we have defense in depth, mistakes can happen, and there will be some sort of backup to prevent something from becoming catastrophic. So with this, often managers miss the point with this because no one likes to be told that their baby is ugly. And when you're consulting, that's oftentimes what you're doing. You're saying, here are the problems within your architecture, within your enterprise. Here's what you need to do to fix it. And the person who was all happy thoughts and unicorns and chipper with you on the phone all of a sudden becomes defensive because you just said that a system that they were involved in being the architect for before they became a manager, you basically just blew holes in it. So be prepared for that. When we talk about stolen credentials, that also plays into the failure to maintain a good password policy. So I will be the first to say there's a lot of things the federal government does not do right. There's a lot of things that the Department of Defense does not do right. One thing that I will say that they mostly do right, on the user side at least, is within group policy, as defined within their security technical implementation guides, the STIGs, the way that they implement the password policy. Understanding that 15 characters as a minimum password, it's better than nothing, it's better than 14, it's better than 13, so forth and so on. And enforcing the complexity requirements, that's good. But per the STIG, it's got to be more than 15 characters. It has to be complex. It cannot be one of your previous 24 passwords, and you have to change it every 90 days. That's pretty good. But I mean, the problem with that is because the rules are so stringent, people like me can hop on Instagram, type in the physical address of a location, and see Instagram posts that people have put there, and they don't sanitize their desk before they take the pictures, and there's a post-it note on the side of their monitor that says password, and then there's a string below it, Nick 1999. And as a byproduct, that doesn't solve the problem. It provides a temporary solution to a problem associated with technical compromise, but it does nothing for insider threat, nor does it do anything for physical security threats. And with password reuse, I mean, you can change your password at work every 90 days. And if someone could even be security conscious and do that with their personal accounts. But if they're using the same password or a slight variant, then what good is it? And multi-factor authentication, that's coming around. I've been out of the government sector for over 4 years now, so that may have changed there since then. So that is a possibility. But honestly, with password managers, the major threat with a password manager is that you either use the same password everywhere, or that someone gains access to your system and is able to steal the password database and then use something like, say, Hashcat to break it. But the thing is, if you're using a password manager and you only have to remember that singular password to get into the manager itself, who cares if you have a 64-character complex password? I mean, under technical means, it's not going to get brute forced, and you don't have to remember it. So it works out well. So the TLDR of what I'm getting at is organizations often put the burden entirely on the employees, specifically non-technical employees, creating an us versus them mentality, which does not fare well in any situation. And they fail to see that technology can help them mitigate the problem, but I may irritate a few vendors when I say this, nothing is going to entirely solve that problem. And then with what I was saying regarding telling organizations that their baby is ugly, I mean, they fail to acknowledge their own shortcomings. And that's just kind of nature of the beast. And I mean, it's something that it takes a strong person to get past. So here are the new metrics that, in my opinion, actually matter. So we're looking at ratios. We're comparing opens to clicks. So based on X number of people, we'll just say in a sample set, we send 100 emails to 100 people. So 1 email per person. 50 of them open it. Okay. So the open to send is 50%. And then of those who open it, 30 of them click it. So now you have a ratio, an open to click ratio of 60%. Open to action. Action being inputting data in a form, making a phone call, going to a website that is not via a click. It could be downloading a file, executing a file, anything past the click, like basically the payload. And then we look to open to reporting. Reporting is singularly the most important metric, period. Because whenever I oversaw security on the government contract I worked on, yeah, I didn't want people clicking phishing emails. I didn't want people doing things that were contrary to security best practices and policy. But if something happened and one of those situations occurred, someone clicked something, someone did something, I wanted them to tell me so that I could get ahead of it, because Brian Krebs and the FBI are not intrusion detection systems. What I mean by that is I want a user to say, hey, you know what? I feel really stupid for this. And I got this email. It looked really legit. So I clicked it and I input my password. The first thing I would say is you are not stupid. You fell victim to this, but you're dealing with a professional con artist in this rate. So let's walk through the steps of what you did so that I can take proper precautions to make sure that this is minimized. So if we're looking at the incident response process, this would be containment. So we can't respond to something that we don't know about. You know, if we are informed that we've been infected by ransomware because the ransom messages are up on every host, and now we're all of a sudden having to go buy Bitcoin to gain access to our stuff, then reporting has failed. But then we look at the same thing regarding clicks. So based on X number of people who clicked, how many of them actually input information into the form? Or how many people actually opened the file or whatever? And then how of the people who clicked, how many people reported it? And these are ratios. There are other metrics coming with this in a moment. And then the same thing of the number of people who did something to the number who reported it. Ideally, that should be a 1-to-1 ratio right there. So if 10 people did the action, an open security policy without fear of reprisal would generate 10 people reporting it. And while that number is not where anyone would like it to be, the reality of it is, if it's reported, something can be done about it. So open metrics, we discussed those previously. So open to click, action, reporting. Same thing with the clicks. I kind of got a little bit ahead of myself, but that's okay. So again, these are all ratios. So click to action, click to reporting, action to reporting. Here's where it gets really good and interesting. And what I mean by that is these are the distance metrics. The distance metrics, they require a little bit more work. And the reason I say that is because with these distance metrics, you need to be able to coordinate. If you're doing this in a consulting role, you're going to need to coordinate with your client to either give them a script or get access to, or coordinate with them to get these numbers. But a distance, like open to action distance, that is the amount of time from the first open until the first action, and the distance from the specific open to the specific action. So if 25 minutes elapse between the time the first email is opened and then the first person inputs data in the form, okay, that gives you a little bit of time about how much time you have to let it percolate, so to speak. But specifically, if you know who performed the action, how much time between the time they opened it until they performed the action. So the same thing would exist for clicking. The same thing would be for opening to reporting, clicking to reporting, and then how much time from the time someone inputs something into a form until they report it. Because this is really giving you an understanding of how much time you have to detect things and how much time you have to take proper action. So the relevance of this, I mean, the reality is we want to avoid incidents altogether. Ideally, if we could, as much as I love my friends in the incident response community, the DFIR folks, I mean, there's some battle-tested and true people who know what they're doing. They are far smarter than I am, but I would love nothing more if we were able to create a security environment and community that effectively would put them out of business. Not because we just aren't investing in incident response, but because we are doing everything right on the design, implementation, and management, as well as the awareness and operation side. That would be awesome. But I mean, one look outside your window in this day and age, and you know we don't live in a utopia. In fact, with each passing day, it appears as if we are in more and more of a dystopian fantasy realm. And in that sense, you know, we want to avoid the incident altogether, but we also want to be notified as early as possible. As I stated before, we don't want to be notified of a ransomware infection by the FBI, Krebs, any other journalist for that matter, or the ransom demand for us to go buy Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Apple gift cards. Something that I pulled from quite heavily is Win Schwartau's book, Time-Based Security. And basically, I'll give you the TLDR of that concept. Basically, that book is talking about, instead of wasting time and resources trying to build something that's going to be 100% secure 100% of the time, your architecture should be built in such a way that it can defend and mitigate until a detection can occur and a response be triggered to further mitigate the action. So you should focus on building your defenses that protect, but then you should also with some level of equivalency, work on building detections and remediation steps. So how much lead time do you have to enact your incident response capabilities? That's a very important measure because, I mean, we have proactive things like threat hunting. There are other proactive measures out there. We have some highly sophisticated SIMs, but at the same time, that doesn't always give us a good idea on how much time we have to enact. So what if I'm a consultant? Well, you're in a unique position if you are. And what I mean by that is you can provide even more value to your clients. In fact, you could produce your own somewhat official copy from the same vein as the DBI or the ITS or ISTR. And from that lens, that allows you and your company to have something that people are willing to pay for in addition to your services. So you can do metrics on two levels, per engagement or population. So per engagement, that would be all of your, for this particular engagement, for this particular client, or this particular type of engagement, or this particular scenario. And the thing is, you would probably want to do it on a per client basis unless you can get client permission for you to either release their information or heavily anonymize and redact information so that you're focusing solely on the metrics. You can also do sliced metrics, which would be per engagement, scenario, or type across all clients. So then you have population metrics, and that would be samples per client, so all engagements with a single client. And then the full population, which will be all engagements, all clients. And you can also, from a sales and marketing perspective, that's not really my wheelhouse, but I will say that if you can show a before and after statistic, and you can show a trend where through your engagements and through focusing on these particular metrics that clients are getting better about things, also even showing what I might call unauthorized engagements, unauthorized pen tests, so to speak. If you can get metrics on that in terms of how focusing on these metrics and building the defenses around these metrics could improve those responses, that is writing your own check. So with this, we've got a few statistic measurements. So this is going to be a few slides talking about applied stats and math. So just humor me for a moment. So we have the mean, also known as the average. That's the central tendency. That's basically everything added together and divided by the number of. We have the median, which is dead center. Coincidentally, that's where I graduated in high school. I graduated number 73 out of a class of 146. We have the standard deviation, and that's a very important number because that detects the amount of variation between data points within the data set. It's a fairly complex thing to do by hand, but with Excel and other platforms, it's really not that challenging. When we talk about statistics, we have to look at methods. And with this, we basically have three ways we can go. We can do quantitative, qualitative, or mixed method. Quantitative is assigning a numeric value to everything. The statistics I provided earlier within this presentation, like all the new metrics, you can do these quantitatively, and that sticks to ground truth. There's nothing subjective about it. It's purely objective because you know that you sent the email to 100 people, you see that it was opened by 50 people, and you see that it was clicked on by 30 people. There's no disputing that. Those are numbers. You can take a qualitative approach, which is what we do typically with things when we're writing reports and we say this is of informational, low, medium, high, or critical severity. Those are all qualitative measures. Then we have things like the mixed method, which has some level of quantitative analysis with it and some level of qualitative analysis. A good example of that would be the CVSS, Common Vulnerability Scoring System. So they take into account confidentiality, integrity, and availability. They assign weights between 0 and 10 on that to determine how severe it could be, and then it goes into a slight little algorithm, and then they say it's a low, medium, high, critical. So that's a mixed method. In all honesty, with data science, there's a thing called regression modeling. Linear regression specifically, is the act of comparing each individual data point by type to each other data point. So if you have 20 data points, you have to compare data point 1 versus data point 1 through 20. Data point 2 through data point 2 through 20, so forth and so on, and you compare all of those. It's a fairly complex thing, but honestly, it's not that hard to script in Python or R. I did it in an academic environment using the R language, and it took me 6 lines of code. That was it. So it's not hard. It is a complex thing, and you aren't going to get a whole lot out of it unless you're using a very large data set, like to the tune of like 10,000 rows and 100 columns. And that's just my own analysis. Your mileage may vary with that, but you can do a lot of things with that. But the thing about data science, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of that, it has a very similar thing that what we've seen with the word cyber. Vendors have gone out and said that cyber can solve world hunger and all the other problems, and they've just abused the word cyber to the point where it puts a sour taste in our mouths. The same thing is happening right now with data science, AI, machine learning, and all of that. And I'll tell you, a lot of the stuff that we're seeing out there is hot garbage. But data science in its purest form is just trying to find a numeric way to represent something to allow us to better understand something. Regression, for example, is commonly used in 2 scenarios. Regression by itself is used to find out who the best person to market to may be. You can take 2 data sets with a known true and a known false and do what is called cluster analysis and find out what is statistically true and statistically false. And that's very commonly used in the insurance fraud world. So there's a lot of ways that you could go with that. Honestly, cluster analysis is just a fancy way of saying A/B testing. So with practical applications of this, you may have to have some integration with a SIM or system logs or with a ticketing system. You've got to find a way to measure the time. You might have to import some sort of list of logs with this. I'm a fan of epoch time, but you can do with it what you will. I've pseudocoded this concept, but I've not fully finished it just because I've been working with the book, getting some training stuff put out, and then some other code like the Decepticon bot. So yeah. But with this, again, there's the cluster analysis. You can apply things like recurrent neural networks and long short-term memory models. This is something I'm playing with a little bit right now. So within the Decepticon bot, I'm using a long short-term memory model and what people have tweeted to generate text blobs that could be construed as tweets. So that code is not done. I'll be presenting that later this year. So just be on the lookout for that. In conclusion, you don't have to have a doctorate in data science to collect, analyze, and interpret data points. And as I said before, there's a lot of snake oil within data science, especially within sales and product teams. And as much as I like to think of statistics and math as a ground truth, all that stuff can be manipulated for ill gains. You know, we do not live in a utopia. This world is somewhat dystopic, and in that or dystopian rather. Got ahead of myself thinking there. But anyway, it can be manipulated. So question the data source. I'm going to open it up for questions, and then as we're going through questions, I've got a few other slides of things to share with you. So just as we're waiting to see if anything comes in, if you want to come to a free conference in October, it's going to be virtual. So it's not been formally announced that it's virtual, but it will be virtual. You can come to Hacker Halted for free. There's a coupon code to get in that. My upcoming speaking engagements, basically Tennessee Professional Investigators Association, Hacker Halted, Sector, and then other conferences that I had committed to, but the dates are still TBD. Basically for all the, for Sector, that is where Decepticon bot is going to be released. That's the one that I'm working on. It's a Twitter disinformation tool used to help domestic violence victims get out and stay out. And in this case, it is to allow them to confuse their abusers on social media and not sound the alarm that they have abandoned their account. And then I'm in the process of, this slide I would normally say, here's my upcoming training. I don't have anything scheduled right now, and that's because I'm rewriting my business OSINT, people OSINT, and OPSEC courses. They were in a 4-hour format. I'm rewriting them for a 6-hour format with more labs and practical stuff. I'm also developing courses for Intro to Social Engineering, Technical Social Engineering, as well as Linux for Social Engineering and OSINT, and a Scripting and APIs for OSINT course. So if you want to be up to date on any training, future training, or anything along those lines, just sign up to my mailing list at the bottom. I don't spam people. Literally, all I use it for is to say, here are my upcoming training events if you would like to attend. I do keep track of who attends which training, so that if I'm only emailing someone, if I'm only emailing the list about OPSEC training and you've already taken it, I don't want to bother you with it. So I do keep track of that, but that's about it. But with that being said, I'll open it up again for any questions, concerns, complaints, grievances, thoughts, opinions, or otherwise. Not that I've ever rehearsed this phrase.
We got some questions in the track 3 chat. Did you want to read them, or do you want me to read them to you?
I don't see them, so I guess you'll have to read them to me.
Alrighty. The first one is from Cyber Ron. How do you create the right level of metrics? Too many can be overwhelming. Metrics should tell a story, not be the story.
Agreed. So to create the right level, basically, you would just need, it would be something agreed upon before the beginning of the engagement. This would be something within the scoping documentation. And you would have to determine what the objective is. For someone, an organization that hasn't really dabbled with the metrics initially, you may want to run just a flat engagement and find out how many people opened in general. So you might want to stick with ratios in the beginning to see how many people opened, how many people did this. And then as time goes on, focus less on those metrics and more on distance metrics, because ultimately, you know, in the IT world, we're constantly chasing nines, right? So 99% availability, 99.9%, all the way to 5.9, 6.9, 7.9, 8.9, right? And then that gets into the business continuity, disaster recovery worlds of like maximum tolerable downtime, all that garbage. And it's not garbage, it's just not applicable to what we're talking about. So all those things. So in essence, we're always striving to add another 9 to the end. So start with something like a ratio, or focusing solely on people clicking or doing actions. It may be best to start at actions because that's the most catastrophic potential. And then, okay, now we've got people, we previously had a ratio of 40% performing actions. Now we're down to 13%. Okay, now that people aren't doing the actions as much, let's start focusing on getting them to click less. Okay, now let's start focusing on helping people to better identify phishing emails and other malicious types of things from the subject line. And at the same time, you should be working on your technical solutions to find a technical solution to protect the user whenever they click, or to help identify using things like natural language processing, fraudulent emails.
Awesome. So there's another question by Sneakers and LeetSpeak. Do you find there's a better presentation to leaders/clients, charts, graphs, or just straight numbers?
Well, no two people are the same. And to a degree, it takes a certain level of social engineering and reading the client to understand what's going to click better with them. So in my reporting, I tend to go with a little bit of everything. And I will try to set it up in headers to where the customer can filter for what they're looking for, because some people operate solely off of text, some only off of the raw numbers, some people charts, graphs, and then some people just verbally. So it's just a happy median of all of them. So within reporting, this will make, if you implement these types of metrics and put these numbers within a report, it is going to make your report longer and it will take a little bit more time. But the thing that goes alongside that is you may be able to get through to that one person that you previously could not get through to.
Okay, I have Lily Abner is asking that you go back to the slide where the next talks will be happening. You missed the slide earlier.
Sure. Let me get that going here, right there. And of the ones that's dates are to be determined, ZeefCon is in Gdynia, Poland. Black Swan Security Congress is in Prague, Czechia. No Name Con is in Kiev, and besides Orlando is in Florida. Sector is in Toronto, and Hacker Halted is virtual.
Awesome. Now, it doesn't look like I see any questions. I'll give everybody another minute to post their questions, and if not, then they can post them to you in track 3, and you can continue via text at that point.
Sounds like a plan. And if anyone needs their passwords inspected, I'll turn my camera on. I am actually an authorized state password inspector if we need to inspect it. I mean, this wouldn't be layer 8 without me pulling out the badge. So there is my state password inspector badge. I am a legit googly-eyed state password inspector. So if anyone needs those inspected, feel free to hit me up privately on the Discord, and I will inspect your password very thoroughly.
I was wondering when you were going to bring that up. I think that was my intro to you when we first met.
Oh yeah, because we were, if I recall correctly, it was at the first Layer 8 SERI, and we were at the speakers dinner, and basically everybody who had a background in social engineering was trying to one up everybody else, and we're like, hey, can you go get this password? Can you get this person to give you a hug? Can you find out this person's mother's maiden name? And like, we're just out there just sniping people left and right. And then I got that couple that was trying to get a picture with the boat behind them, and I was like, oh, there's a big boat coming in. Hey. I took their picture and was like, hey, I'm doing an anthropology survey. What was your mom's name before she was married?
Yeah, there was a lot of shenanigans going on with Layer 8 number 1.
Okay. Well, there's always shenanigans.
We do have another question. CryptoCat posted in the beginning of the presentation. Can you confirm what is in the Petri dish?
I cannot confirm what is in the Petri dish solely on the fact of this is a stock image brought to you by PowerPoint. So unsure.
I say next time, just make a good story to go with that one.
Yeah. InfoSec Sherpa is saying it is the Rona, and it very well may be the Rona. I can't tell though, to be honest. Honestly, it kind of looks like a Petri dish, but it could be from my time in the Navy having to solder stuff all the time. Kind of it looks a little soldery, but just to make a good joke of this right here, this right here actually kind of looks like the Layer 8 logo. The little dots up here kind of look like the Layer 8 logo.
Oh yeah, true.
So that is the embodiment of Layer 8 in the Petri dish.
Good job. Alrighty, it looks like we don't have any more questions. Oh,
I think we got a few. There's some people in the
typing.
Discord right now. Oh yeah. I see November is one of them typing. I'm certainly going to drive by your house a little bit later today, since I know who you are and where you live. I am going to come by and inspect your password manually. Actually, yeah. Well, actually, very quickly, I do have some code on GitHub that does inspect passwords. So let me pull that up and I'll share the link with everyone. Just because, you know, we do need, it's always a good time for some password inspection. As soon as I can find the repository, I could have swore I put it up here. There it is. Here is the password inspection code. It's not my cleanest Python, but it is in Python. So basically, here you execute the password inspection stuff. So if you want it, right here is the link. So if you want to inspect your password, feel free to use my Python script to do so. Any other questions before I get kicked out?
They're still on that Petri dish.
Oh, they're gonna be on that Petri dish all day for like weeks. By the time that people get done with it, there'll probably actually be something growing in it. Like it may even be a bonsai tree or something. But before we end everything, thanks everyone for coming out and spending some of your day with me. I appreciate it. I hope you're safe from all things in the world. We definitely live in troubling times, and if I can be of any assistance to you for anything related to anything social engineering or OSINT, as soon as I can get back to my PowerPoint on the other screen, there's my contact information. So feel free to reach out. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm probably easier to reach via Twitter, but I try to be responsive. Yeah, thanks everyone. Be safe. Stay hungry for knowledge and experience, because everything will eventually be okay. And I look forward to when we can meet in person again.
Great, thanks, Joe. Thank you for staying on time with your talk, and you actually ended early, so that's great.